The lights were supposed to come up to applause. That was the plan. That was the expectation. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. That was the story everyone involved thought they were walking into when Prince Harry and Meghan stepped into the theater at the Sundance Film Festival in Utah. A curated moment. A symbolic reset. A carefully staged debut meant to signal credibility, cultural relevance, and a fresh chapter. Instead, something else filled the room. Not clapping, not cheers, but a sound that didn't belong there. Booing. And not the polite, confused kind either. This was sharp, loud, unmistakable. The kind of reaction that slices through a room and changes the air instantly. Here's the question no one wants to ask out loud. How did one of the most managed couples in modern celebrity culture lose control of the room at one of the most unforgiving film festivals on earth? Because Sundance is not Hollywood, and Utah is not a red carpet audience that claps on cue. This wasn't just an awkward moment. It wasn't a bad night, and it definitely wasn't random. This was the collision of expectations and reality. A moment where narrative met resistance, where branding met fatigue, where a carefully planned debut unraveled in real time, in front of cameras that didn't blink and an audience that didn't care. And if you think this was just about a documentary called Cookie Queens, you're already missing the bigger picture. Let's rewind. Sundance has always been different. It was built as a counterweight to Hollywood excess. It celebrates grit over gloss, authenticity over polish, stories that feel raw, uncomfortable, unfinished. The audience prides itself on smelling inauthenticity from the first frame. So when word quietly spread that Prince Harry and Meghan would debut a new documentary here, reactions were mixed before anyone even arrived. Curiosity, yes, but also skepticism. Why Sundance? Why now? Why this project? Cookie Queens was being positioned as something warm, intimate, human. A documentary meant to soften edges, to tell a story about community, purpose, and reinvention. On paper, it sounded harmless, almost wholesome. But Sundance audiences don't just watch films. They interrogate them. And more importantly, they interrogate the people behind them. What many didn't realize at the time was how much pressure was riding on this single appearance. This wasn't just another premiere. This wasn't another controlled streaming rollout where edits could be managed and criticism could be framed as online noise. This was live, unfiltered, and once the doors closed, there would be no spin room big enough to contain what happened inside. Think about it for a second. When was the last time Harry and Meghan stepped into a space where they weren't the primary audience's emotional focal point, where people weren't predisposed to applaud them simply for showing up? Sundance doesn't care about titles. It doesn't care about lineage. And it certainly doesn't care about celebrity grievances. It cares about one thing, whether you're real. And that's where the tension began long before the booze. Because even before the screening, something felt off. Attendees noticed it in the lobby, in the lines outside, in the way conversations hushed instead of buzzing. There wasn't excitement. There was curiosity laced with caution. People weren't asking, "Can you believe they're here?" They were asking, "Why are they here?" That distinction matters. Inside the theater, the mood didn't lift. It tightened. Phones came out, but not for selfies. People were recording, watching, waiting. And when Harry and Meghan entered, the reaction wasn't explosive. It was fragmented. Scattered applause here, silence there, and then, unmistakably, audible disapproval from pockets of the room. That's when everything shifted. Because once booing starts in a place like Sundance, it doesn't stop quietly. It emboldens others. It creates a ripple. It turns individual discomfort into collective expression. This wasn't an internet pylon. This was a room full of people reacting in real time, with no filter and no algorithm to hide behind. Ask yourself this. How often do celebrities get honest feedback to their faces? Almost never. And that's what made this moment dangerous. The irony is impossible to ignore. A documentary framed around empowerment and authenticity debuting in a space that values those things above all else, only to be met with resistance. Not because of what it said, but because of who was saying it. Because by this point, the audience wasn't just watching a film. They were watching a narrative they'd seen before. A narrative some were tired of. And fatigue is deadly in a room like that. What makes this moment even more significant is what it represented culturally. This wasn't about royal drama or tabloid gossip. It was about trust, about whether audiences still believed what they were being asked to believe. When the boos cut through the room, they weren't just rejecting a couple. They were rejecting a story, a framing, a version of events they no longer felt aligned with.